Okay, so you want to own a nightclub. Find a warehouse, fill it with lasers. Charge tourists $1,000 for a leather couch. Watch the cash pile up in the dark. It is the ultimate hospitality fantasy. You do not just run a business. You control the velvet rope. But behind that rope hides a machine that destroys almost everyone who tries to operate it. This industry ruins fortunes overnight. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how the trap snaps shut. Even on the operators who look untouchable, you have probably stood in one of these rooms. You paid $25 for a plastic cup of vodka, or you watched a group drop $6,000 on a single bottle. You probably assume the owner keeps every penny. Surely that money has to end up somewhere. According to IBISWorld in 2024, this is an $8.5 billion industry. It is spread across 44,000 operators in the United States alone. But the real secret hides in the markups. A premium VIP bottle might cost the venue $150 wholesale, yet it routinely sells for $6,000 to the customer. That is based on industry benchmarks verified by Forbes Hospitality in 2023. Where does all that cash actually go? It vanishes into structural liabilities, off-the-books promoters, and a cultural decay rate that forces owners to constantly rebuild their own rooms. The truth is much darker. In this video, we are going to prove three things. First, we will show you why giving away half your inventory is not a mistake. It is the only mathematical way a high-end club functions. Second, we will break down the exact numbers. We will show how a slight drop in relevance wipes out massive profits in a matter of weeks. And third, we will open the federal court records. You will see what happens when organized crime realizes your cash flow is untraceable. The men in suits arrive at the back door, because right now you are only looking at the party. Now let us talk about the brutal financial reality hiding underneath the strobe lights. A nightclub is not really a hospitality business. It is a high-intensity cash extraction machine that happens to serve drinks. But to understand the money, you have to realize that the word nightclub describes three entirely different financial models. The sign on the door might look the same, but the unit economics are totally separate. First, you have the college club, or the volume market. Their customer is a 21-year-old who wants to stand in a loud room for as cheap as possible. The price point is a $10 cover charge and $8 well drinks. The gross margin on those drinks is high, but the overall net margin is low, usually around 5 to 8%. They do not sell expensive tables. They sell density. The owner makes money by cramming 700 people into a room with minimal decor, cheap plastic cups, and the lowest possible operating costs. If the volume stops, the club dies instantly. Second, you have the talent venue. This room targets the music fan or the festival tourist. Instead of a cheap cover, you are charging a $50 to $100 ticket just to walk through the door, before a single drink is poured. These clubs look like they make a fortune, but their margins are completely squeezed by the supply chain. They are essentially indoor music festivals. The venue has to pay tens of thousands of dollars to book a famous DJ just to guarantee the crowd arrives. The gross margin looks amazing until you realize the talent took half the revenue before the doors even opened. Third, you have the premium ultra lounge, or the bottle service club. This is the one everybody pictures when they dream of getting rich, built entirely around the high net worth individual or the corporate spender. You are selling a $6,000 minimum spend for a leather booth. The gross margin on the alcohol is absurd, regularly hitting 70 to 90%. But the catch is that to attract those few whales, this club has to give away 65% of its room for free. So when we talk about a club making millions, we are mostly talking about that third model. And that is the model that costs a fortune to build. If you want to build that premium room, the financial bleeding starts immediately. Most retail businesses can rent a vanilla box in a strip mall, add some paint, and open in a month. A nightclub cannot do that. You have to find a commercial landlord willing to accept a high-risk, high-noise tenant that operates at 2 in the morning. That alone restricts your options to entertainment districts where the rent is already at a massive premium. Then comes the physical build-out. According to Nightclub and Bar Media in 2023, the startup and entry build-out cost for a legitimate venue ranges from $1 million to $5 million. You are not just buying leather sofas and strobe lights. You are paying for structural transformations. You need industrial air conditioning systems powerful enough to cool hundreds of moving, sweating bodies in the dark. You need acoustic treatment so you do not violate city noise ordinances and lose your lease. You need plumbing that can handle extreme surges in restroom use. over a 4-hour window. Add in a capped liquor license, which you often have to purchase from another owner for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and your budget is already completely shattered. Then you hit the hidden layer. This is where most first-time owners destroy their capital before opening night. Everyone budgets for the bartender. Nobody budgets for the true cost of security. You might assume you are just hiring a few large guys at the door, but according to 2024 salary data from Indeed, a venue is actually paying $25 to $40 an hour for bonded, licensed security personnel. And the wage is the cheapest part, because a nightclub is an environment purpose-built for intoxication, density, and loud noise. When fights break out, your security staff have to physically intervene. That means workers' compensation claims. That means elevated risk. And that means insurance companies view your business as a massive liability. According to Insurance in 2023, annual liability insurance premiums for high-risk venues often sit between $50,000 and $150,000. You have to pay that upfront just for the right to unlock your front door. We will track exactly how a club makes that money back in a moment, but understand what has already happened. Before a single customer has crossed the velvet rope, you have spent $3 million on construction, handed the city a fortune for a permit, and paid 6 figures in insurance premiums. Your bank account is entirely drained. All you have is an empty dark room and a desperate need to pull $60,000 a night out of the local population just to survive the debt payments. Now let us talk about the running costs that arrive on Monday morning. You have your building, but keeping the lights on in a high-intensity environment burns through cash in a way no normal retail business ever experiences. First, there is the rent. You are occupying massive square footage in a premium entertainment district, but you only actively generate revenue for about 12 to 16 hours a week. You pay the exact same premium commercial lease rates as a clothing store, but your building sits completely empty for 5 days out of 7. Second, there is the burdened labor cost. If you examine the operational chart in our reference diagrams, you will see the massive footprint required for staff and management. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2023, the average hourly wage for a bartender is $17.50 before tips. But a nightclub requires a small army. You have barbacks, VIP hosts, coat check staff, and lighting technicians. When you add workers' compensation premiums and constant recruiting due to brutal turnover, the actual cost of putting a human behind the bar is dramatically higher than the hourly wage suggests. Third, there is the invisible subscription layer. You are publicly broadcasting copyrighted material for profit. According to ASCAP in 2024, the annual hidden subscription for music performance rights can cost between $2,000 and $5,000. If you ignore it, federal copyright fines can bankrupt the venue entirely. Fourth, there is the leakage. According to the National Restaurant Association in 2022, the industry average shrinkage and employee theft rate on unmonitored liquid sits between 20 and 25%. In a dark room where bartenders move at maximum speed, tracking alcohol is nearly impossible. 1/4 of your inventory is given away, spilled, or quietly stolen. Fifth, there is the promoter cut. To guarantee a packed room, you rely on independent promoters who control local social networks. According to Nightclub and Bar magazine in 2022, these promoters quietly take a 10 to 20% cut of the table spend they bring in. These running costs are fixed. You have to pay them even if the crowd stays home. This is exactly how a club makes that money back. The survival of the machine relies on 2 entirely different revenue lines, and they have completely different margins. The first revenue line is the volume market. This is the general admission crowd. They pay a $30 cover charge at the front door and buy individual drinks at the main bar. The gross margin on those drinks is standard for hospitality, usually around 70 to 90%. But the operational cost of serving the volume crowd is massive. You need more bartenders, more security, and more cleanup staff. After you subtract the heavy labor burden and the 25% shrinkage rate, the net margin on the general admission crowd is incredibly thin. The owner does not actually live on this money. The volume crowd exists primarily to act as extras in a movie, providing the background energy that makes the room feel important. The second revenue line is the premium market. This is the bottle service section, and it is the only reason the business model functions. A group sits in a roped-off booth and orders a premium bottle of vodka. The actual wholesale cost of the liquid inside that bottle is about $150. The venue sells it to the table for $6,000. That is not a standard hospitality markup. That is an entirely separate economy. The owner lives entirely on the premium market. Delivering a $6,000 bottle requires exactly one waitress and one security guard for a few minutes. The labor cost is virtually zero. The shrinkage is zero because the bottle is sealed. The profit from just 3 VIP tables can easily exceed the net profit from 300 people sweating on the dance floor. The general admission crowd pays to keep the lights on. The bottle service crowd buys the owner a house. That is the actual machine. Now let us talk about why the physical capacity of the room destroys this exact math. If you want to understand the hidden economics behind more everyday businesses, subscribe to the channel. Why does the physical capacity of the room destroy the naive math? Let us run a simple capacity test. Imagine you have a legal fire limit of 500 people. You need $60,000 to break even on a Saturday night. If you charge a $30 cover and nobody buys a table, how many people have to walk through the door? 2,000 people. You legally cannot fit them in the building. The venue would be shut down by the city fire marshal before midnight. So you are forced to extract hundreds of dollars per head from a tiny fraction of the room just to make the math work legally. You do not sell expensive tables because you want to. You sell them because the fire code makes volume mathematically impossible. This forces the owner into a structural trap. Your entire financial survival depends entirely on a social behavior you cannot control. You need high net worth individuals to continuously choose your specific room to signal their status. But status chasers are the least loyal customers on earth. They do not come for the music or the drinks. They come for the crowd. What happens when the crowd decides the room is no longer the center of the universe? If a newer, louder venue opens 3 streets away, the high spenders migrate instantly. When the whales leave, the promoters follow them. When the promoters leave, the attractive extras follow them. Your physical overhead stays exactly the same, but the revenue evaporates in a matter of weeks. You cannot force people to feel cool. You are renting momentum. And when that momentum breaks, owners often resort to desperate measures to keep the cash flowing. They start cutting corners. They look the other way when promoters bring in illicit money. They stop checking identification carefully. They let the wrong people secure the VIP sections just to cover the rent. The entire model rests on the illusion of exclusivity, but the owner has absolutely no control over what the city decides is exclusive tomorrow. Meet Peter Gatien. In the 1990s, he was the undisputed king of New York nightlife. He owned the Limelight, the Palladium, the Tunnel, and Club USA. These were massive, culturally defining venues built inside abandoned churches and historical buildings. He was generating millions in untraceable cash every single week. He was filling rooms with the most famous people on the planet. From the outside, his empire looked immortal. But this is exactly what happens when the crowd turns into a liability and the momentum breaks. The sheer volume of unmonitored money and unregulated behavior flowing through Gatien's clubs attracted the worst kind of attention. The federal government and the local police department decided his venues were not just parties. They claimed they were institutionalized drug markets. The authorities did not just issue a simple fine. They aimed to dismantle the entire machine. In 1996, federal agents raided his properties. Gatien was charged with racketeering. The government alleged he was running a criminal enterprise. Imagine the scene inside the courtroom. A man wearing his signature eye patch, who once dictated the cultural pulse of Manhattan, sitting surrounded by defense lawyers, watching his life's work get dismantled by financial auditors, informants, and federal prosecutors. The bitter irony is that Gatien was actually acquitted of the federal racketeering charges. He won the headline trial. But in nightlife, a regulatory kill is rarely a single bullet. It is a slow, agonizing bleeding out of your working capital. The constant police barricades outside his doors destroyed the exclusive atmosphere. The VIP crowd migrated immediately, because nobody wants to pay $6,000 for a table while waiting for a police raid. Stripped of his pricing power, the massive fixed costs of those historic buildings remained. The millions in legal defense fees drained his operating capital. Then the state liquor authority moved in to strip his licenses. The state then pursued him relentlessly for tax evasion, which finally broke the empire. He pled guilty to tax charges just to stop the bleeding. Thousands of bartenders, security guards, and promoters who had worked in those rooms for a decade did not come back to work. By 2003, the man who built modern New York nightlife, was deported to Canada. He was legally banned from standing in the country where he made his fortune. It was a slow, grinding institutional death that took 7 years to finalize. Now contrast that slow decay with a sudden collapse. Meet Chris Paciello. In the late 1990s, he owned Liquid, the absolute hottest nightclub in South Beach, Miami. He was making millions. He was dating A-list celebrities, hosting global musicians, and defining the luxury bottle service era. He was the most powerful hospitality figure in Florida. But a nightclub is a high-speed cash extraction machine, and unmonitored cash always attracts predators. Paciello had hidden ties to the Bonanno crime family in New York. His venue was a massive financial success, but the cash flow could never outrun his past. His reign did not slowly bleed out over years of state audits. It ended overnight. In late 1999, the king of Miami high society was arrested in his own driveway. He was not taken down for a noise complaint, a liquor violation, or a fire code failure. He was indicted for a decade-old, mob-related bank robbery and murder in Staten Island. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took him down instantly. The club immediately lost its operator. The elite reputation was shattered. The money stopped flowing before the weekend arrived. One day, Liquid was printing millions of dollars and hosting the elite. The next day, it was tied to a federal murder investigation. That is the ultimate danger of a business that handles massive amounts of unmonitored cash. It draws in operators and silent partners who bring fatal liabilities straight through the front door. Before we tally the final verdict, let us look at the federal indictments that explain why the mafia always shows up. According to 2017 federal indictments from the Eastern District of New York, the threat of organized crime in nightlife is a documented structural risk. The court records reveal how members of La Cosa Nostra specifically targeted cash-heavy venues to enforce protection rackets. Because a nightclub relies on avoiding police scrutiny to maintain its atmosphere, operators are uniquely vulnerable. The indictment detailed how syndicates would demand a 10 to 30% shadow tax on a club's revenue, simply for the right to operate without violence. The owners were hostages to their own unmonitored cash flow. When the federal government intervened, it resulted in racketeering convictions and prison sentences. That is the ultimate severity of the cash trap. If you print untraceable money in the dark, predators will find you, and you cannot call the police. So, should you buy a nightclub? Let us run the final numbers. The model I am about to build is mine, built from the published build-out costs and typical margins we discussed. To open a premium room, you will spend roughly $3 million on the build-out, acoustic engineering, and licensing before you pour a drink. In a highly successful year, generating $6 million in annual revenue, a 15% net margin leaves the owner with $900,000 in profit. But in a bad year, when a rival opens and VIP tables sit empty, fixed costs do not change. You will hemorrhage $100,000, forcing you to fund losses from your own savings. That is a brutal $1 million annual swing, driven entirely by the shifting mood of the city. To break even on baseline overhead, this model requires roughly 2,000 paying general admission customers every week before a single dollar reaches your pocket. This business is strictly for the operator who understands crowd psychology, security logistics, and strict inventory control. It is a fatal trap for anyone who simply wants to be the center of the party. Okay, so you want to own a nightclub. You thought you were buying a building to sell $25 vodka. But it was never really about the liquid in the glass. It is about capturing social momentum and monetizing vanity before the crowd moves on to the next room. Clubs that survive will not necessarily be the best parties. They will be the best managed fortresses. Because you do not own the crowd, you just rent the attention.